Hi everyone, here we are in week 6. We are headed towards the finish line. This is a 7-week course. We're getting really close. You guys are doing a great job. In today's overview video, we will do a module overview. We're going to talk about patient teaching. We're going to look at your reading assignments, talk about the discussion board, and finally, we're going to spend some time on your lesson plan Google Slides presentation. So let's head into Canvas and look at these together. Here we are on the home page. Scroll to the bottom, go right into week 6. This week, we're focusing in on the patient teaching aspect of teaching. We will also look at feedback and reflection. Your assigned tasks, you're going to have some assigned reading in the following pages. You have reading from No Time to Teach, a few videos to review, the discussion board, your lesson plan Google Slides project, and finally some preparation for week 7 infographic. I have a question for you. How many of you are multitasking during this video? How many of you are on your phones doing something else, cooking dinner, watching kids running around, working? You hear a ventilator alarming down there that you think, oh, maybe I should go get that. One more alarm. How well do we learn when we're distracted like that? Now, put yourself in the setting of your patients. Not only do they have distractions around them, but they don't feel well. Have you ever gone to class nauseous, not feeling well, with a cold? And it is hard to focus. We're definitely much more focused on ourselves than the content. And we probably just don't soak in nearly as much as when we feel well. So this is definitely something we need to keep in mind is our patients are in a tough setting. They're sitting in the hospital. There's a lot of distractions, and then they don't feel well. What is their own state of mind? Or do they even have the capacity right now to understand what you're instructing them? Your readings this week are going to give you some tips, tricks, techniques on how to approach this and approach a patient in this stressful situation. When is the best timing? How do you ask those right questions? When do you do open-ended? When do you do close-ended? Really seizing the right opportunity with the patient is very valuable and critical to them actually learning and being compliant when they get out of the hospital. As I was preparing for this presentation, got me thinking about patients that I've instructed. And honestly, with the quote-unquote no time to teach, I just hop in the room, go teach what I need to, and especially like trach care. Yes, it's continuous throughout the time, but I might be just doing it on this one day that I'm on. And then those trach patients continually are coming back to the hospital with infections. They're not taken care of. You have an unusual odor coming from it, and we wonder, well, didn't they pay any attention to what I taught them? Well, maybe I wasn't wise in the presentation, in the timing, in how to approach that patient and recognizing their own stressful situation. So when you're teaching your patient in a clinical setting, I want you to be considerate of their physical setting, where they are, what's surrounding them. Is it an ideal time to go into their room for them to learn? Also, be considerate of the patient's own frame of mind and mindset. Is this a time where they're able to learn? You're going to have to obviously be flexible, find those teachable moments in that clinical setting. Also, an important thing is to leave them with some kind of material, some videos, some handouts, additional information, additional resources with the same information. So they get it from several different directions to be able to emphasize and reinforce what you have instructed them. Finally, how are you going to be able to assess your patient in their learning? And I mean, you can't necessarily like students give them a final project or an exam. They're in the hospital, they're sick. How are you going to assess that they have learned this material? Let's look at those resources that are going to help answer some of these questions and guide us in patient teaching. First thing I have for you is this video of this dialogue regarding teachable moments with your patients. There are several patient education videos linked here. I would definitely recommend going into this link, and if you have the additional time, looking at some more of these videos regarding patient education. This part is optional, but please do watch this Teachable Moments video. You're gonna read your No Time to Teach text, pages 133 to 147. They're evaluating, understanding, and the patient education process. Finally, I have a few articles for you to read here. They're very brief. They're important to read for your discussion board, and great information regarding patient education in the clinical setting. Let's take a quick look at your discussion board. This week's discussion board is on the difference between feedback and reflection, so you will have to read the materials from the previous page to partake in this discussion. Here, I've provided 2 different prompts for you to choose from. The first prompt is, how do you use feedback and reflection in the clinical setting? Just as an example for you is as a preceptor to a newly hired therapist, how do you use feedback and reflection in that setting? Also, this week has been about patient teaching. You can use that as an example as well of utilizing feedback and reflection in your patient teaching. I'm asking you here to make this personal and look back at any teaching that you yourself have done and utilizing the tips that you have read about in this module. Answer these prompts anywhere that you feel that you employed this tip well in that situation, and also an area where you feel you could have used it better in your personal teaching situation. So alternatively, you can choose this particular prompt. Is it better to teach chronic disease management in a group setting or as one-on-one education? So you're going to support one method or the other, either a one-on-one education or a group setting. And you should be utilizing the learning principles that you read about this week to support your side. In this post, please demonstrate the knowledge that you have learned this week. On to our next topic, the Google Slide PowerPoint presentation of your lesson plan. You've spent the last 6 weeks learning how to organize your teaching through lesson plans and learning techniques for effective teaching. In your Google Slide presentation assignment, you're going to continue to build on that lesson plan project assignment and organizing your teaching. So thus far, we have picked and narrowed a topic in week 1. In week 2, you created and aligned your objectives. In week 3, you built out your lesson plans, you detailed the content, you detailed assessment, and here with the Google Slide presentation, you are taking that lesson plan and putting it into practice. So this Google Slide presentation is what you would be presenting if you were to teach this particular lesson plan. I'd like to emphasize that in this class, you're not going to actually be going and teaching the lesson plan, or at least not for this class, but maybe you will in the future in your department. So again, you're not presenting it, but you are putting that lesson plan into presentation format. Just another step in learning how to organize your teaching. On the assignment page, there's a student example of a Google presentation. Below that are the key items that your slideshow must have. What we're going to do together is we're going to walk through this example and look at each of those key items as we walk through it. In turn, I will demonstrate on the Google Slide platform the expectations that I have for you for this particular assignment. Let's start with learning the Google Slides platform. So if you're on a Chrome browser like I am here, I can just open a new tab, go to my Google Apps, and you'll find the Google Slides platform. If you're not on Chrome, you can open one of your Google Docs. You're going to click on the Docs home on the top left. And then here in the menu, you'll find those apps listed, and there is Google Slides. So let's walk through this student example together. First question I have for you is, who is your audience for this presentation? If you answered your student, your learner, you're right. Also, if you answered yourself, you are also right. So your audience is twofold here. Yes, it's for the students, but from a teacher's perspective, this is also very much for you. This presentation is your bullet point reminders to guide you through the content. So your slides should be organized the same way that you organized your lesson plan, from objective to objective. Okay. Within those slides, you need to add content reminders within each objective. You should not be filling this out exhaustively, whole paragraphs. You don't want to have to read paragraphs out loud. Not a very engaging way to learn. And as you guys probably know as a learner, that's really overwhelming when you see a PowerPoint slide that has all those words. And in the world we live in today, for me, for sure, I check out. I want quick bullet points as reminders, and that is the most effective and efficient way. Remember, you're the expert in this content, so you should be able to elaborate on each of these bullet points, and you can always write within the notes underneath and elaborate for yourself if necessary. But again, the slideshow should only have just quick reminders for yourself that you can verbally expand upon. Now, for your students as the audience, you need to make these slides easy to comprehend and accessible for them. So let's look at this criteria with our example. The first criteria is a title slide. Here on the example slideshow, this title page is very visually appealing. For me, it feels very engaging. And then the title is in bold and larger than everything else, and it stands out. From the title, we have the student's name and each of their credentials. Please include all of your letters back here, whatever it might be, our RTNPS, ACCS, RPFT, whatever you have there. Next, below that is your job title. Let your audience know your qualifications for giving this presentation. And finally, for school here, you're going to write the university, the class, and here you'll put me, Professor Julia Bood. Next criteria, we have the pre-assessment slide. This is the same pre-assessment that you did in your lesson plan. You're putting it as your second slide here. Just the questions that you've created to see where your learners are before you begin. As you develop your presentation, each formative assessment that you have in between your objectives, you should include a slide for that. It's really easy as you get going on a roll in teaching. If you don't have a reminder slide, it's just easy to keep going from one objective to the next and forget that you haven't done your formative assessment. So put a little reminder slide in there that, hey, time for that formative assessment, even if it's just a slide that says assessment or discussion or just quick questionnaire or whatever it might be, just to remind you, hey, don't skip that part. Are they getting it? Are they tracking with you at this point? Next criteria is the objective slide. Real simple here. You're just going to write the 3 objectives that you've created from your lesson plan. I'd like you to note this slide here, again, really visually appealing, and the student has emphasized the way I've asked you to over the past several weeks, emphasize that action verb, identify, list. Next, we're adding the content slides. A couple key points for your content: include any images. And if you have videos, don't just copy and paste that URL. Embed that video right into your presentation. You guys already practiced that in the second week with your introduction. Another piece, we're going to utilize what we call the 7x7 rule. Let me show you what that is. The 7x7 rule is just a guideline. So essentially the 7x7 is there shouldn't be more than 7 bullet points, and horizontally 7 words within each bullet point. Again, this is just a rule of thumb and a guideline. This slide is a great example of going by the 7x7. If I go a slide above, we definitely have less than 7 bullet points, but horizontally, some of those have more than 7 words, and that's okay. Again, this is just a guideline, and this looks really nice, but it's just a guideline to keep in mind. On this content slide, the student has included a video. They've embedded it directly into the presentation, and I do ask that you do it that way. It's going to be a lot more smooth for your presentation instead of clicking on a URL and popping up a new window. So the way you do that in Google Slides, very simple. You're just going to say insert, click on video, and you can search YouTube for your video. Just include the URL or a Google Drive URL. The next criteria is your citations and references. So we're actually veering away from APA on this slideshow, and we're doing more AMA style. So this is the superscripted numerical citation. So you can see here the superscripted 5. The way to do this within Google Slides, we just put our 5 in here, highlight it, we say format. We're going to format our text, and we're going to pick superscript. Take note, there's a shortcut there of Control+. That would have worked as well. So our last slide on the slide deck is our references page. And here our references are in numerical order, so that superscript 5 that we saw is specifically this reference of the Mayo Foundation. These should show up in numerical order as your slideshow progresses. So you should start with 1 and end with whatever your last value is. Another point to make here is that you can reuse these numbers throughout your entire presentation. So this person's first citation early on was number 1. Well, they could use that number 1 citation also all the way over here on slide number 35 and still call it number 1. As you're creating your presentation, include images. You can see that they make the slide much more visually appealing and engaging. You do want to keep your audience focused in on you, and images are a great way of doing that. And there are some learners that are going to learn better through images, and images are just another way to emphasize that learning. As we go down this student's presentation, this slide 16 here says discussion. This is their assessment slide. This is what we talked about including your formative assessment on a slide. This is a break in objectives and a transition of objectives. And here's the assessment piece where the instructor gets a feel of the understanding of their learner. Also, at the end is another assessment slide. Next criteria is a summary slide. The summary slide is just an overview of the full presentation. It should include your objectives. It can go into a bit more detail of that. Remembering the 7x7 rule of thumb, some additional tips and tricks that I'll pull directly from this presentation is this slide has a great organization to it. Instead of just listing out, hey, here are the 3 categories, they did it a little bit differently, very visually appealing. This next slide really utilizes images in a great way. This slide could have easily been words, asthma triggers, and then listed out each of those, but that cat stands out to me. I'm going to remember that cat. It genuinely emphasizes the point. Again, great use of images here. And on the next slide, to emphasize main categories here, they've used bold, they've underlined the title. So use all of those tips to emphasize, bold, italicize, underline. This is a great tactic for presentations, is keeping it lighthearted, entertaining, probably not too much, not to be the comedian that takes away from the content, but including some slides that make you laugh, how to avoid asthma exacerbation living in the bubble. And here for me, as I see this is my mother. We all had asthma, and she was constantly cleaning. Just like PowerPoint, you can use these animations coming in to draw attention and keep the audience engaged. If you want to draw your attention on this slide to the notes section underneath. Here the slide follows the 7x7 rule, and underneath, as a self-reminder, this particular student said, hey, remind the students that asthma patients may exhibit all symptoms or only a few. This is something that they didn't want to put up there. Maybe it's too many words, but just a self-reminder under here in the notes section. And so please utilize this as you're creating your presentation. Also, keep an eye on it, because as I give you feedback, I'll be writing in this section. Here's another great example of how this student is utilizing their notes section. Next on our list is a questions and contact info slide. This is, again, a good reminder for yourself to ask the audience, hey, are there any questions? So here on our example, we see nice and bold, big questions. And then it's important here, some people don't like to ask their questions out loud. They might want to ask you personally. Remind them who you are, put your email there, invite them to connect with you via email. And again, include your job title and qualifications. Again, that last slide is that reference slide. Bottom is our grading rubric. You're going to turn this in the same way that you turn in your Google Doc. Under Start Assignment, there's a spot right here for your URL that you'll copy and paste from your Google Slides. Just a quick little note at the bottom of the assignment here to prepare you for next week. Next week, week 7, you're going to prepare an infographic for this topic. And you're also going to close the loop with your week 2 assignment in your lesson modification. So there was that last column that you weren't supposed to fill out. You're going to have to be sure you have that assignment, and you're going to be filling that out in the last week. Well, here we are at the end of week 6. You guys have 1 week to go. Be sure to look over this review page. Make sure you've done everything for the week. If you have any additional questions, hit up the home page. Here's some resources. Also, feel free to email me and ask your questions directly. Thank you for all the hard work you're putting into this class and into this week 6. I hope you enjoy putting together your presentations, learning about patient teaching, feedback, and reflection. I really look forward to seeing your lesson plan projects.